9, 12, 10, 28, 2, 23.
This is Deep State Radio.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm Mark Polymeropoulos, and this is DSR's Above Average Intelligence Show. Today, I am very happy to welcome as my guest, coming back yet again, Mr. David McCloskey, the author of Damascus Station, Moscow X, and the just-released Seventh Floor, which is an outstanding book. And we'll talk certainly about that today. David is a former CIA analyst and a former consultant at McKinsey & Company. We're not going to say anything about McKinsey.
Yeah, don't hold that against me, Mark.
It has a bit of an interesting name at the agency because the reorganization, and we could, as many people say, is that McKinsey killed the CIA, but that's not your fault. No, McKinsey is a legendary company, just made some probably poor recommendations. While at the CIA, David wrote regularly for the President's Daily Brief, delivered classified testimony to congressional oversight committees, and briefed senior White House officials, ambassadors, military officials, and even Arab royalty. There you go. He worked in CIA field stations across the Middle East through the Arab Spring and conducted a rotation in this counterterrorism center focused on Syria and Iraq. During his time at McKinsey, David advised national security, aerospace, and transportation clients on a range of strategic and operational issues. Again, not the CIA reorganization. He holds an MA from the Johns Hopkins School for Advanced International Studies, where he specialized in energy and the Middle East. David, welcome once again. You know, we are friends. I love this book. We actually did a book event together at Politics and Prose, where I was very honored to moderate this. That was a ton of fun. Although I did get after that, I was sick. If you remember, I ended up getting walking pneumonia, and I was in bed for a week.
Well, I was, you told me you were sick, and I was very careful to not shake your hand that night, and I did not take whatever horrible illness you had back to Texas with me. So
lick your fingers or hands after you shook hands. But we got to start off. There's a lot to talk about. We're gonna this podcast today is certainly designed to talk about your book. I'm all about promoting this, but we do have to kind of put a little bookend, no pun intended, as we're talking about books. Maybe the death knell of your beloved Cleveland Indians, who are no longer playing, beaten by the Yankees, a team I despise.
Yes.
Joe, our producer, is very happy because he's a Yankees fan. I'm a Red Sox fan. I don't think the Indians had much of a chance, though. But tell us, here's the most important thing. Tell us about you going to Game 3, what that was like.
Yes. Well, Mark, first of all, thank you for having me. Second of all, I'm now regretting saying thank you, given the McKinsey & Company mentioned, plus the discussion of Cleveland baseball. I feel like I've been punched in the gut over the course of the weekend watching my beloved Cleveland baseball team go down to the Yankees. The hated New York Yankees, as my grandmother, who is a lifelong fan, always called them. I was trying. So here's the thing. Game 3, for those who don't know, I think it was probably the most epic last-minute comeback in Cleveland baseball history. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth, down 2, and they came back and then won it in extras. I was able to take my dad to that game, which was a ton of fun. We both flew there, saw it. It was fantastic. Like all good Cleveland sports experiences, it's then followed by a colossal failure and total collapse to actually move through. The way I'm dealing with this is I am just trying to tap into the energy of the Game 3 win and enjoy that and those memories and just accept that high, as opposed to dealing with, I've actually had to cleanse my Twitter timeline because it's all just Juan Soto home runs in the the top of the 10th, and I can't watch it, Mark. I cannot watch it. It makes me physically ill to watch Yankees hitting home runs.
Well, I share that kind of feeling of revulsion. Again, Joe, our producer, is in the background. He's going to try to edit all this out.
Good luck, Joe.
But in the end, I don't think they had much of a chance. The Yankees are this, team that has been, of course, purchased, bought, spending.
That's right. It is truly the Third Reich of the baseball world.
Although you could argue that who they're playing, the Dodgers, is the same thing. So this is the battle of the haves versus the haves. Now, of course, as a Red Sox fan, we used to be in this company, but our owner is so cheap now that we are like the Tampa Bay Rays. But anyway, I'm going to watch. I think it's probably going to be the most watched World Series in history. You have the two coasts with massive media followings, and the star power is stunning. I will say, Major League Baseball was praying that your Indians did not win.
Yes. Yeah.
They're
Absolutely. I mean, the baseball, I'm more and more convinced that baseball gods do exist,
Yeah.
and that they really do hate Cleveland baseball. I mean, the World Series you're going from last year's, I actually enjoyed the World Series last year, Rangers Diamondbacks. Major League Baseball did not. Major League Baseball now has the best possible outcome you could hope for. And hopefully it'll actually be entertaining.
Right.
You know?
It went from a regional kind of game to now this one that's pretty stunning. And I'll be watching. I think it starts next Friday. I wonder how much those tickets are going to cost, both at Yankee Stadium and Dodger Stadium. It's going to be something else.
The Dodgers ALCS tickets, by the way, we're going upper deck. I believe we're going for about $1,000.
Yeah.
So I think the World Series will be significantly more.
Not surprised. Although, so this year I managed to go to Dodger Stadium. I was there for something out in LA, and I just jumped on StubHub and went. That's a gorgeous place to see a baseball game. Oh my God! And then I went to Yankees Red Sox before the end of the season. Called up some of my old friends in the government in New York, and they got us tickets right behind home plate. And that was, as much as I hated being there, the Yankee Stadium's very nice as well. So. Again, but taking the subway was just a nightmare. I lived in New York City for a while. I remember that. Anyhow, all right, we're going to get to your book, The Seventh Floor. Again, it's a really great honor to have you here. Congratulations on the book.
Thanks.
As you know, I'm one of the big fans, not only of the book overall, but a couple things. You know, the kind of how you kind of, you know, you get that feeling of what it's like to be at the agency. Lots of anecdotes that I think probably many people have kind of fed you some of the fun things, whether it's the hot dog machine and we'll talk about kind of the hijinks, the pranks. But there's a character in the book that I love, and you know this, and that's Proctor. Yeah. At one point, I think you might have used it in one of your blurbs. I said you were the poet laureate of the operations officer. But Proctor also, I think it was something you didn't use, your editors didn't use, but I said that's the kind of officer that we all wish we want it to be, because she doesn't give a shit. But it's this character development, which is incredible. So you did it again. So first and foremost, what's the book about? Obviously, the title, The Seventh Floor, pretty revealing. But give us a sense of what the book is all about. Yeah.
So, you know, and I share, Mark, your love for Artemis Proctor. She's by far my favorite character to write, and you know, the book to some degree was an effort to sort of tell her story, right? I mean, she's kind of been somewhat of a secondary character in the first two books, and this one is fully hers. So it's a modern mole hunt at the end of the day. It's a story about, essentially, Proctor is running this unit, a fictional unit inside Russia House called Moscow X, and there's a Russian who shows up in Singapore with a secret that he's trying to sell. She sends an officer out to go meet this guy, and of course, Proctor, it wouldn't be a good opening to one of these books without one of her operations going totally sideways. So the officer gets bagged by the Russians, held for a number of months, traded back in a spy swap, and he comes back and basically has this, insight that the Russians have an asset, a double agent that they're running on the 7th floor at Langley, so the executive suite, which of course you know well. And the story there really becomes one of Proctor and her friend, Sam Joseph, who readers, if they've read the first couple books, remember him from Damascus Station. They're working through a short list of suspects that is basically Proctor's best friends and some of her most sort of cherished and beloved enemies. And so it is a bit of an espionage whodunit. We're trying to figure out who is the mole, who are the Russians running. But I think, as I wrote the story, it also became one about just kind of what's it like to work at CIA over a long period of time, to work with your friends, to work with people who start off as friends and become something else. I think it's probably the book that's most of the three that I've written so far that's kind of the closest to trying to tell the story about the kind of, not just the operations of CIA, but kind of the cultural code, the moral ethic, and what it feels like to work there.
And that's one thing that certainly kind of, I think was shining through. And, we all think when we first joined, whether you go through kind of your new analyst training or your case officer training, there's a group of people when you walk in the door and you EOD, you enter on duty, and, and those people very often stay your friends for the entirety of your career. Sometimes people go in different directions, but that's the extraordinary thing about the book, is that there's that kind of, that was woven into this. And you're right. The feelings of betrayal too. I mean, I just, I can't talk about it in details, but there was, I once worked for a boss who actually was spying for an adversary, and those feelings of betrayal are stunning. I didn't like him all that much, but it doesn't matter because it's still a colleague.
Yeah.
But I still keep in touch with friends who I played, as you noted in the book. We played in a softball league right next door at Langley Forks at that field. I think you had it as a baseball league. Well, tell us about that. I'm getting totally off topic on my notes. I just realized because I love the book. Tell us about the famous baseball story in the book.
Well, yeah. So we talk about friendship, and I actually think friendship became, the CIA was kind of the setting for the book, right? Friendship and the different kinds of friendship inside CIA or just between people became kind of a theme as well as I wrote. And the baseball, so there's a scene in the book in which Proctor and a number of her friends, almost all of whom end up being on this short list of suspects, but she doesn't know it at the time, are playing in an intramural baseball league at CIA. And of course, as you mentioned, and I think actually when I was writing the book, I checked with you because I knew I played intramural basketball at CIA, right. And I knew there was a softball league. I was like, hey, Mark, was there ever a hardball league? And you were like, what the hell? Of course not. It's softball. But I knew in the scene that I needed Proctor to be doing something sort of, in a camaraderie fashion with her friends. Like she's just having a moment with her friends where she's playing baseball. But there also needed to be a brawl, this being Proctor. Right. Kind of felt, and I won't ruin anything, but she's essentially just come from this very traumatic experience to show up at the baseball field. And so she had to, sort of blow her top. And it didn't feel as realistic to me to have a brawl at a softball game, although I suppose Proctor being Proctor, I could have come up with one. Right. It felt more like, in this case, I wanted her to charge the mound. And so you kind of needed someone to get hit with a hard baseball going pretty fast. And so I came up with this idea of a intramural hardball baseball league. And I was able to give a lot of the mission centers kind of fun, crazy, creative nicknames as a side benefit. But I do think that spirit of sort of, it's also kind of a normal place to work, right? Where you have intramural sports in a big organization. I wanted that to come through too.
I mean, in fact, the friends I still have now, I EOD'd in 1993 and started playing in those kind of softball leagues. Then I'm still great friends with today. I can't. We're going to get to the story again. I have to, of course, remind everybody about my place of work now, which is not the CIA, and nor is it MSNBC. It's the Vienna Inn. No, sure, it's a place where I spend most of my time, but it's a dive bar in Northern Virginia, which you have featured in the book. Yes. Where Proctor goes and has not entirely untrue, maybe a little exaggerated, but she has bender after bender. But the Vienna Inn, it was neat that you included that because that really is a place of lore at the agency. It's a place where we have promotion parties, where it's a watering hole. It's a place to go after, after work. But love that you included the Vienna Inn, and I'm sure they did as well.
Well, I will say, Mark, I did have to be careful with Proctor's alcohol consumption in this book because in the first draft. I mean, I had a reader, it was actually a former analyst. She read it and she was like, this woman wouldn't be functioning in some of these scenes. Like she's drinking way, way too much. So I was like, okay, I got to go back through this and kind of make sure it's somewhat realistic. And so I literally built an Excel file that had every scene, the number of drinks Proctor consumed, and then a calculation of her BAC, her blood alcohol content, just to make sure that she could actually function. And so, I mean, she's kind of, Vienna Inn or otherwise, sometimes very much alone. She's working through some stuff in this book. And I mean, she's always been a bit of a hard living soul, but I think in this one, she kind of goes to the edge of what her body can handle. Yeah,
absolutely. No doubt about that. Pranks in the book. I love how you included that. Again, I'm sure you had lots of help from people in terms
unnamed
sources. I think in the back of the acknowledgments you said that I helped you.
That's true.
Today in one of the pranks, I'm not sure you revealed exactly what actually did occur, but I will talk about it. Tell us about the prank that you wrote about, and I'll tell you the true story.
Okay, so you're right, Mark. So I think you're right. I did name you in the back of the book. Again, in the spirit of this is a group of friends that kind of just happened to be in the espionage business.
Right.
You know, I was also trying to think. I mean, again, as a writer, I'm trying to think of how can I write scenes that allow me to show that friendship that aren't just kind of two people across from each other talking at a desk. The baseball scene was one, pranks were another. And obviously pranks are a significant part of CIA sort of culture. I was, so I went out kind of shopping. You were included, of course, in this conversation, but just kind of, I probably had a half dozen or more conversations with formers that just said, give me the best pranks that you've heard of or that you were actually part of. And one of them, which plays a significant role in the sort of firing of Artemis Proctor early in this novel, is that a bunch of, I would say, questionable pictures are placed all around her office and are sort of discovered by, subordinates and others who come into her office for meetings. Right. So that's one. There's another one similar to that where a group of her friends, when they're at the farm, essentially break into an instructor's house and litter these pictures everywhere so that they'll be discovered by him and his poor wife, throughout the months to come. And that was obviously that was a Mark Polymeropoulos special, really.
Right, so,
I adapted the setting and whatnot, but I think you were the inspiration for those.
The true story behind that, and I'll sanitize this a little bit, but it was in a Middle Eastern field station. I was on temporary duty assignment. I was the deputy station chief, and I was coming back, and I had to brief a visiting dignitary. I will say one of the top 5 most powerful people on the planet was coming to visit, and the briefing was scheduled for my office, and I was late, and I had about an hour, and I run in my office, and what do I find? The case officers, and we had a really tight station because we were under huge counterintelligence threat of terrorism, all of that very valid. Our embassy ended up being attacked and almost blown up, but ultimately, I walk in and there's a picture, and it was all very hardcore pornographic material that they put in every square foot of my office, the walls, the ceilings, absolutely everything. And the best part about it is in the front of my office, they had taken, I don't know how they thought of this. It was David Hasselhoff. Remember, wasn't he in like Baywatch?
He was in Baywatch. That's right.
And so it's a picture of him sprayed out in a little bikini underwear, and they got my badge picture from the RSO's office and they blew it up in my face there. And I walked in there, and it was actually funny. And I was like, all right, you fuckers, get everything down. So they took everything down. So this dignitary comes to my office as I'm sitting there briefing her. I said, ma'am, would you like a cup of coffee? And she said, I would. And I took my coffee cup, and I had a Cornell University mug there, that I carried around everywhere. I don't give a shit doesn't matter. But, and I looked down, and there is a very enormous sexual organ staring up at me. And I looked at it, and she's like, I'd like that cup of coffee. And I said, ma'am, I think the coffee cup's dirty. She's like, I don't care. I really want coffee. I'm like, I really can't give you this coffee cup. And I took it aside, and it was beautiful. Almost a utter debacle. But no, but the reason why it's really good that you brought that up is because, in the hardest places at the agency, that's where these pranks, happen, because that's kind of the bonding. That's that's what brings everybody together, and that happens, constantly, and it's fun. And then, of course, it gets out of hand, and people have to kind of step in before it gets too crazy. But those things really, really do happen. All right, on a serious note now, let's talk about one of the things about. Again, this is your third book. All of them, I think, were not only incredible stories, but there's elements of it which I think a lot of us can identify with because you pay attention to tradecraft. So talk to us about that. How do you throw in, these tradecraft scenes? Obviously, I think you're talking to people. Mm-hmm. Is it important to do that? How do you even get it through the agency review process? But again, that element of realism, I think, really comes through.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that because I'm obviously an unreformed analyst, and so I was not conducting most of the operations I'm writing about, of course, and so I'm kind of writing about them in the same way that I would if I were just doing the research for the book. But I think it's very much the case that you don't need to have lived stuff to write about it well, but you need good friends who have and who are willing to talk to you and tell their stories, right? I think, for me, it all comes out of a desire to be authentic to character, really, right? I'm the protagonists or just main characters of these books are CIA operations officers. And so to get their world right, I don't want to fetishize the tradecraft, because if there's too much of that, it frankly could get kind of dry, but I've got to deal with it realistically to describe how these people live, breathe, think about the world, what they do in their day to day, And so I try to be as authentic to it as I possibly can, acknowledging that in points of the story, like I'm not writing a nonfiction book about CIA. So there are going to be points where I do think being absolutely 100% accurate about the tradecraft or the timeline or just the bureaucratic politics of, the espionage business, like I'm going to have to break those rules in order to get the story right and to make it propulsive and readable for people who aren't looking for a tradecraft handbook. But at the same time, whenever I do break the rules, I try as best I can to be clear that I am breaking a rule and that I know I'm breaking a rule, And so I'll try to include little things where like the characters might even acknowledge that they're doing things differently than they otherwise would have. Because I don't want to cheat as much as I can, and I guess what I would say on the clearance side of things, Mark, is like, I've been surprised, and maybe I shouldn't be, but I've been surprised by how much the PRB has let go through. I don't think I am revealing any bits of tradecraft that are like, wow, earth shattering. I mean, a lot of this stuff is out there. Most of what they've edited out or redacted have been like mentions of specific pieces of the organization, like courses, tradecraft courses, the specific names of those, randomly like software programs that we would use that are actually also available, in the unclassed world, but that the CIA has contracts for, like, so kind of bizarre stuff. But like, I had a whole segment in Damascus Station where I describe in a good amount of detail how to build a car bomb. And they didn't edit that, but they edited the name of the messaging program that the case officers were using to talk to each other around it. So it's been, I will say though, it's been fast and it's not been intrusive on the plot or the story.
I agree. I've read a lot of stuff, and I agree with you. When I try to be reasonable, give them deadlines. Sometimes they come back with some strange redactions, but generally they're pretty good.
Pretty good.
And because once you get the hang of it, it's so if it's if something's been in the New York Times or the Washington Post and you refer to that, it's okay. And then they have some of their kind of strange idiosyncrasy. They didn't like me using JSOC, but I could use SOCOM, Joint Special Operations Command versus Special Operations Command. Okay.
Really?
Yeah. And so, but it's stuff like that. But if that's their thing, that's okay, because you got something else in. And I would throw in there that other countries' intelligence officers do run surveillance detection routes, and it's pretty much the same kind of tradecraft. So you are able to do this. But let's go back to the story itself, and because in essence it's a mole hunt, and you think that that's kind of old, kind of Cold War relic type stuff, but it's actually really not, because these things still occur. Well, look what's just happened in the news. There was just a document spill. Two top secret documents just made their way into I guess a kind of a Iranian affiliated Telegram chat. So there's going to be a mole hunt. There's going to be an investigation within the U.S. Department of Defense. But how'd you decide on that? A good old classic mole hunt story, which is not really the genre or the subjects you hear or you see in kind of espionage writing today.
Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of a shame because there's so much potential in that kind of story. It's a whodunit, right? And that's an evergreen trope not even a trope, but it's just a sort of an evergreen structure for a story in crime and mystery, right? Is there's a body, like who who's the murderer. It is a way to push, if you do it right, it's a way to push the tension around the answer to that question all the way out into the back end of the book as far as possible, and leave the reader guessing the whole time, even if you never give them any actual information to help them solve the mystery, right? So I think it's really effective on that count. To your point on like it being a relic of the Cold War, I think I'm actually not even, as I read and kind of did research for this book, I don't even know where that idea comes from, because it's, you're talking about, you had a supervisor who was working for the opposition. I mean, we've had, it's not like these kind of revelations happen every couple months, but, every few years or something. I mean, there's a new, there are people on the inside of our intelligence services working for other countries.
Right. I'm sure there are right now.
Right now, right? Yeah. So it's very much a modern feature of the espionage business, because at the end of the day, I mean, the best way to wreck your opposition is to get someone inside that service who will give you, the juiciest stuff. So that's always going to be the case. And I thought, so it felt like, A, it's a modern story. B, the story structure of just sort of a mystery is really good. And then C, like, for me, I was really fascinated in this idea that you could have people that you have worked with for years and years and years and years, and even be friends with, who are betraying you the entire time. Right. What is like? How do you even think about that? As the betrayer or the one who was betrayed. I was sort of fascinated by that. To me, it actually has some similarities to like domestic or kind of psychological suspense stuff, where the premise is essentially like, your neighbor, your husband, right? Who are they, right? You don't know who they are. Right. That I think is eternally fascinating to us just as humans.
Well, one of the things that I think you were trying to accomplish in the book, and you very much did, is, you don't know who actually is the mole.
Yeah.
And I know you've asked this.
I was bothering you constantly when you were reading. Right. I was like, do you know? Yeah.
And that's and by the way, people who are going to claim that they knew, I think, are not telling the truth. Good. But it's, and I think you're right. That's actually really good. It's not predictable. And this is the kind of book too, in which, you can fly right through it, because of that, because that suspense certainly is building. And one of the things that you tackled again is Russia. That's the kind of the geopolitical setting here. But it's not necessarily inside Russia, because a lot of this takes place in the U.S. But I do want to note again the element of realism here is that you kind of introduce some Russian illegals who are not the nicest of people, and I'll say that think about what's happening in Europe now, where the Russian intelligence services are being unmasked as not spying on Europe, but undertaking sabotage and assassination operations. Yeah. So there's an element of truth to this, and one of the things you introduce in the book here is that could Russians do this on U.S. soil? And the answer is, of course they can. Yeah. But how did you move from a kind of Russia internal then more to kind of the U.S. as a setting, or why?
Well, yeah. So interestingly, those illegals in the book, who I said they live in Dallas, so I kind of imagine them as actually just living in my neighborhood, like down the road. I mean, I actually have the husband, Peter. He works for Southwest Airlines, which is based here in Dallas. He's in financial planning and analysis. So I thought, and I think this is a bit of a distinction between the way I've architected my mole hunt story and most of the other ones in the genre, although I'm sure I haven't read all of them, so I can't speak authoritatively on it. Like, I was about halfway through the arc of the first draft, and I was feeling a little bored. Mole hunts, I mean, almost by definition, the actual spade work is really, really boring, right? Totally. I mean, it's just digging through reports, compiling basically a giant matrix to show where there are anomalies, in different types of reports, and then trying to focus in on why those occurred and all. So it's like, it's not super thrilling stuff. Right. And I felt like I needed some chaos. And so I brought these characters into the book to see what they would do. And the woman in particular, her name's Irene, is, probably a sociopath. I'm not explicit about it, but probably a sociopath. They've got this weird kind of commitment to Russia. Both were, raised by Russian emigres to the States. And so there's this sort of second generation immigrant thing, like we don't quite fit in here, but we're not also Russian. And to me, like that was a way to just kind of get some kinetic stuff in the book, to be honest, because I like my books to sort of build, and then eventually there to be kind of this hockey stick moment where a whole bunch of stuff blows up. And it felt like having Russian illegals here who have been kind of unchained to go deal with, I shouldn't say too much, but to go deal with the threat was a way to get that into the novel. And so I just kind of leaned into it.
What about the writing process itself? You and I have talked over the years too, just how difficult this is.
Yeah.
Even getting up in the morning, what is your kind of minimum that you have to write? How about taking drafts and throwing them out? How about sending them to your editor and the editor telling him that it's all
sucks.
It's a labor of love, but this is hard. But you managed to do it 3 times. It's hard, but so go over for us. Maybe start off. I definitely want to hear kind of on that macro level. But when you wake up in the morning and you're immersed in this book, what are you thinking? How do you kind of push your day and then your week and your month forward in terms of planning?
Yeah. So my process is very inefficient, and I if any listeners to this have better ideas, please contact me through my website, because I could use help if there's a better way. Basically what I do is I start with an image in my head of the climactic scene of the novel, something that I think will sort of, all the potential energy of the book is leading to that moment. And once I have a sense of what that is, and now in each of the 3, and I'm working on a 4th book, and it's been the same for this one. Once I have some idea of that scene, and I might not actually know any of the characters involved, or I might not even know where it is. It's just, there's some rough sense of what that scene kind of feels like and what generally is going on. I will usually have that scene. I'll have some idea of a setting, right? Because I think character comes out of setting and plot comes out of character. So you kind of got to get the setting right. So the setting for the first book, of course, was like Syrian Civil War. Second book was present day Russia. Third book was kind of CIA. And, the 4th one is Israel, Iran stuff. And so I have a setting, I have that scene. And then literally what I do is I just start writing, and I usually try to do about 2,000 words a day, 5 days a week.
Okay.
And that's a good clip. So you can kind of get to, within about 3 months, maybe 4, there's a first draft, and that first draft sucks. It's really, really bad. It's hard to overstate how bad it is. You've got giant plot holes you could drive a train through. The character stuff is not dialed in. The prose isn't that great, but you have something to react to. And then literally what I'll do is I'll go back through it, and I'll make myself a couple pages of notes of stuff that I know needs to get fixed. I've got little things I might need to fill in with research. Maybe like I need to go and read a book on this, or I need to go and research this thing. Go through it again, like just knock all that stuff out. And then literally the process is just kind of rinsing and repeating. And as you go, you realize that there's some stuff in that first draft that was okay, but almost, I probably do 5 to 10 drafts, and almost none of that first couple swings at it will be there. Certainly nothing that was important will really be there.
Right.
The characters might, but all of the kind of scenes that make the book what it is, they're very rarely in the first kind of draft. And so I end up, as a result, throwing a lot of stuff away. It's very inefficient. I write, the books are, 100,000+ words, and probably write almost 300,000 over the course of drafting. And so the editing, quote unquote, that takes like 9 months,
How do you deal with criticism? So your books are fantastic. But I haven't checked, I would be a little weird if I went on Amazon and checked all the reviews, but occasionally you're going to get a bad review.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
How does that work for you and your thought process? Is you have to kind of steel yourself for this? Let me just throw one thing on top of all this stuff. As you and I are totally different kind of venues, but as I've gone off and done a lot of TV stuff, I still have imposter syndrome. Like,
yeah,
I was on a panel the other day with Dennis Ross, who's an ambassador, a legend in the Middle East, and it was at the Hayden Center, and I'm like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
And it's on C-SPAN. I'm like, what is happening? And so I still have that imposter syndrome, and sometimes you screw up, sometimes there's some criticism. How do you? And it's interesting because coming from a job in which you do have a sense of kind of supreme confidence. There's some humility involved, but is it? Are you kind of pinching yourself every once in a while? Like, holy crap, I'm a writer now. I have these books; they're all over the place. I'm a little bit of a celebrity here and there. You're one of the kind of this up and coming stars of the espionage business. So imposter syndrome. How do you take criticism?
Yeah.
It's are you walking tall right now, or are you feeling like or catastrophizing like around the corner? I'm going to read this shitty book and no one's. How about going to a book and no one shows up? Sorry, I'm probably talking about myself more than you.
Well, I was going to say, so wait, you being on a C-SPAN, panel with Dennis Ross wasn't on your bingo card 10 years ago?
No, but I'm like, I don't deserve to be here. Like, what am I doing? Like, this is hard. I had a freaking nervous breakdown, and it was fine. And he's very nice.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's kind of, or I go on MSNBC. There's a million people who watch Morning Joe. What am I doing here? I say that all the time. So, all right, your thoughts on? I just threw a whole bunch of stuff at you.
Well, look, I feel like every day as a writer, and I think it's going on TV, dude, same category, right? Like every day is a three-legged stool of basically fear, joy, and self-loathing, and and it's just a question of like what proportion those will be in. Even days where really wonderful things have happened, they're still afflicted by some amount of fear and self-loathing, because I feel like every time I confront the blank page, I have to deal with imposter syndrome. I have to deal with a fear that I won't be able to replicate what I've done in the past. I actually am pretty good at filtering out the negative stuff. And I just generally, as a side note on reviews, I will read, obviously, if it's a thoughtful written review somewhere, I will want to read it. Amazon, Goodreads, that kind of thing. I think as a writer, it's not a good idea to read that stuff because what ends up happening is either A, you read good reviews and your head swells up into a balloon and you think, oh, well, I'm amazing. Or B, you read terrible reviews and then you think you suck. And the reality is neither of those headspaces are particularly productive for good writing. You kind of want a healthy amount of skepticism about your own talents, but you also want that coupled with confidence to always be trying to improve and be putting words on paper. And that's sort of a weird balance to maintain. And I think reviews mess it up. I saw a great interview with Quentin Tarantino a few years ago where someone asked him, how do you deal with criticism of your movies or any of your style? And he's like, I just tell people to suck a dick. And I think,
that's right.
I think, you kind of have to have this mentality of like, I'm putting my best into this thing. I am trying to make the most incredible story you've ever read and put that down on paper so that you will stay up late and you will ignore family for days and you'll be thinking about the book, after it's done. If you don't like what I'm doing, go read something else. Yeah, and so I think you kind of have to, at least for me, it's helpful to have a bit of that mentality too. That's like, I'm doing something here that I enjoy because I'm writing these books because I would want to read them, period.
Right.
And, if you're not into it, there's tons, there's so much other content, just go find it. So I think, for me, I really love to write. Like my best days are ones where I get to spend 7 or 8 hours just deep in the book. That's what I live for. It's fun to have written the books and to see them up on a shelf and, to have them out there in the world, but no review, good, bad, ugly, whatever, no book advance, good, bad, ugly, it's going to change that. I'm just going to keep writing. And I think that to me is my healthy spot of like, just get up in the morning and you write,
So the quote is, every day is a three-legged stool of fear, joy, and self-loathing.
That's right.
Did you make that up?
So I definitely have not made up the like fear, joy, and self-loathing combined as being part of the writer's life. But as far as I know, I think that's my quote. Although I don't know, I could have picked it up somewhere. I don't know who said it. If not, I'm happy to take credit for it.
No, but there's a part, because when you do this, if you choose to be in the public eye, you're putting yourself out there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there is a vulnerability there, and you just have to be able to kind of deal with it. And anyone who says they don't care is lying.
Absolutely. Like, of course I care how the books are received,
Right.
and that they sell, and that people I get to keep doing it. Like, I really do care. But once they're out there, I'm feeling this now. Like, the book's been out for 3 weeks, and I kind of there's I can help promote it. I can have conversations like this, and but like, I can't do much anymore, so it's got to, the world sort of has to accept the book and see if it likes it or not.
Frankly, there's luck involved too. I mean, a friend of mine wrote a book, and this is years and years ago, and he was lucky he got on at that time there. It was Bill O'Reilly, like the equivalent of Joe Rogan. And the book became a bestseller, and but it wasn't, and nor would it have been, but it did because there was 5 million people who saw something. There's luck involved there. So, but again, it's a tremendous achievement. Let me just say again, I absolutely love the book. I think readers will as well. It has the kind of authenticity. It has the feel of what CIA was like. Incredible characters. So I encourage everybody to certainly get the book, purchase it, write a great review. But not most importantly, but like we were saying, you never rest on your laurels. So, and I know you feel this way too. You're working on something else. What's next? There's another book in training. Well, first of all, any of the same characters? Or are we moving on?
So right now, none of the same characters. Like, there's no overlap at all, which would be the first time. The first 3 books, there's been some character overlap between the 3. This one's totally different. It's an Israel-Iran story. It's all Israelis and Iranians. It is a Mossad versus the Quds Force.
Are you going to go to Israel for any kind of
I have. So I have had a lot of conversations with Israelis, including some Mossad formers. I had actually been very close to convincing my lovely wife to let me do a research trip there, and we were having those conversations literally in I think it was late March, early April, and then there was the drone and missile volley from Iran, and she was like, our life insurance policy isn't that great. Maybe you stick this one out. So I haven't been able to make it yet. I would like to. Now, I mean, I spent time in Israel when I was back at the agency, but it has been over a decade. So it's been honestly, the way I've been constructing it has been very similar to the way I constructed my second book, Moscow X, which is one where, I had not served in Russia. I had not been to Moscow. And so I had to just have a ton of conversations with people who had. But it's shaping up to be a story about essentially imagining, like, what if the Iranians had the capability to hit individual Israelis inside Israel? Some Mossad officers that the Iranians want to send a message to.
Did you see the news today?
No, actually. What is it?
Shin Bet just arrested 7 Israelis in a spy ring run by the Iranians.
Okay, so interesting. I will have to check that out, because I had seen stuff from like a month ago in which the Iranians, maybe largely through sort of kind of social media or LinkedIn kind of stuff, had gone and found Israelis who would, put up sort of propaganda posters. I think they tried to convince one of them to start a forest fire. This is
different.
This is different.
Full on tasking, and it was all for money. So if you go back to our old world of what was this silly acronym? MICE. Money, ideology, coercion, ego. It's weird because I use this now and I talk to people like I don't even remember getting taught that at the forum. Probably because I didn't pay attention. But ultimately, it looks like they were recruited for money, but it was serious. So so I guess in a good way.
Were they witting? Did they know that it was Iran on the other end?
Doing it for money. And so what you're doing, though, is you keep writing on subjects it is almost by chance. I mean, remember Russia, Ukraine stuff, but you're writing on subjects that are really relevant in the news. So I would say, if I was your editor, I would say, come on, David, giddy up.
I know.
The second floor thing, this is old news. It's going to sell great. Let's get another one.
Tell me about it. Well, it's interesting. Were they Persian Jews who were recruited, or was it just
Russian?
Okay. Interesting.
I don't know. I got it, but it just popped it in everyone's feed, and everyone's like, "Holy crap!" If you look at social media, so in my old kind of weird intel geeky world, like I want to, and you will too. Like okay, how did they do this? How were they recruited? What was the tradecraft? What was their motivation? And because it goes a bit against the narrative of, I thought that the Iranians would have a very difficult time recruiting Israelis. It turns out, that they don't.
Well, one of the things. I know we're getting a little off topic here, but one of the things that I was interested with, because I kind of like this mechanism of, hey, the Israelis have been doing this in Iran, right, for 20 years now, really exploiting a lot of the fissures and cracks in Iranian society, be they ethnic, religious, whatever, to recruit people who will do work for Mossad. Israeli society right now has its fissures and cracks. And you kind of, if you're the Iranians and the smart Iranians understand this, it's not so hard to imagine how you can use that to recruit people who might be willing to do things. So I think it seems perfectly plausible. Good fodder for a spy novel. Maybe.
There you go. Now hang up after this. I know you got some more kind of PR stuff to do, but get back to writing. But again,
that's right.
David, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for. I want to thank you again. It was awesome seeing you. Awesome for joining us. I hope you'll consider coming back again with book number 4 comes out. I want to thank everyone out there listening. DSR will be back later this week with more of our regularly scheduled podcasts, and we hope you'll join us for them, and then join me again for the DSR Above Average Intelligence Show. Again, David McCloskey, the great author. The 7th Floor is an amazing book. Not just because I'm in the acknowledgments, although it certainly helps. I mean, clearly, you're playing to all of our egos, all of our motivations. But awesome book. You've turned into a great friend. Love reading this stuff. Good luck, and keep up. Kind of the what is it? The book circuit.
The book circuit. That's right. That's right. Well, thanks for having me, Mark.
You got more stuff to do. Awesome book. Thank you so much, David.
Thanks for having me, Mark. This was great.
Don't hang up yet.